For decades, global military spending remained relatively constrained, but rising tensions and supply chain fragmentation have suddenly sparked a massive, synchronized global rearmament cycle. Across multiple regions simultaneously, major alliances and national governments are under pressure to aggressively raise defense budgets relative to their total economic output. This diagram illustrates an order backlog. A timeline stretching into the future rapidly fills with block units representing billions in contracted future revenue. On paper, it's highly secure, but zooming in reveals severe operational friction, production delays and shortages threatening delivery schedules. Explosive top-line revenue growth in defense manufacturing does not automatically translate into efficient bottom-line profitability. A contractor's profitability is dictated by the efficiency of their production lines and the structure of their contracts, regardless of the geopolitical urgency. To understand why, we have to look at working capital intensity. In defense manufacturing, working capital is the money tied up in the day-to-day operations of building complex hardware. Scaling up production means a contractor has to buy specialized parts, stockpile materials, and hire skilled labor well before they ever deliver a finished system. This creates a severe cash flow lag. Building a missile defense system or a submarine involves years of intense, expensive production funding before the final, massive government payments actually hit the company's bank account. Let's look at this chart to see how that dynamic plays out. This shows a hypothetical manufacturer receiving a surge of orders. The top line represents reported revenue, steeply climbing from $10 billion to $14 billion over a few years. Because the company has to secure advanced components in a highly uncertain supply market, they have to stockpile. We can see the inventory and working capital line surging aggressively upwards, jumping by $2 billion during that exact same ramp-up phase. Here is where the math catches up. While accounting earnings look fantastic, the actual free cash flow plummets into the negative zone. There is a stark visual divergence between the rising revenue on paper and the actual cash the business is generating. Rapid expansion without strict inventory management can silently drain a contractor's liquidity. In this sector, an order boom can easily trigger a cash crisis. That cash drain is compounded by operating leverage. Defense plants carry immense fixed costs, maintaining specialized machinery, regulatory infrastructure, and highly trained engineering teams. All of that must be paid for before a single unit rolls off the line and generates profit. But the ultimate test of profitability comes down to contract structure. Defense agreements generally fall into two categories: fixed-price contracts and cost-plus contracts. This diagram compares the two models. On the left, the fixed-price agreement has a rigid outer bounding box, representing a locked total payout. In stable economic times, these are highly lucrative if executed efficiently. But the contractor must absorb any unexpected cost overruns. On the right, the cost-plus agreement has a flexible boundary, where the government reimburses costs and adds a profit margin on top. Watch what happens during an inflationary environment. Inside the fixed-price box, the internal input costs expand rapidly, physically crushing the profit margin against that rigid ceiling. And those input costs are highly volatile because modern defense systems share complex commercial supply chains. Contractors are competing directly with consumer tech and civilian aviation for specialized metals and semiconductors. If a defense company is locked into multi-year fixed-price contracts during an inflationary supply shortage, massive geopolitical demand becomes a financial liability, not an asset. Zooming out from the factory floor, the sector faces an inescapable macroeconomic constraint. Defense contractors primarily serve one type of customer: national governments, and governments operate under strict sovereign debt limits. This chart visualizes a clear fiscal paradox. The bar representing defense spending attempts to rise rapidly during periods of geopolitical stress. However, it hits a rigid upper boundary representing national public debt limits. Once it reaches the ceiling, spending growth flattens out, illustrating how excessive public debt can eventually limit fiscal flexibility. This leaves the defense industry facing two very divergent paths. One is an optimistic scenario of durable, multi-decade capacity expansion. The other is a bearish scenario where excessive optimism leads to overexpansion, bottlenecks, and an eventual collapse of margins when procurement slows. Realizing this risk, governments are shifting their strategies. After discovering how quickly modern warfare consumes stockpiles, they are moving away from merely buying finished weapons and instead investing directly into the scalability of the industrial base itself. Ruthless execution, cash conversion, and technological adaptability now dictate which firms thrive in this cycle and which ones succumb to the costs of rapid scaling.